The Manor on Polk Street. Written by me, Corbin Silas Wayland Pepio. Though the tale is undoubtedly taken from my mother, and she took it from my uncle. And, as stories like this often go, he likely took it from someone else. It was there in that most western land, where the Pacific Ocean beats against the cold rocky shore, where tall evergreen trees swayed in the breeze from side to side from the whispers of the wind, that the greatest of legends arose. The men who crossed the Atlantic on the Wayflower were wild enough, beset with the disease of exploration and adventure. But those who traveled to the deepest distance and got themselves swallowed up in the savageness of a continent, only to then get spewed out on the other side, they were the wildest of all. They lived on the Pacific coast of Oregon, where, if there was ever such a thing as a haunting or paranormal beast, it was certainly there. It was there that legends like Bigfoot gained their notoriety. Yet few towns in the state were so entrenched in that eerie wonder than that of Wisdom, Oregon. Newly arriving to the town was none other than a young girl by the name of Abby Jones. She was a girl of just 10 years old. Small red pigtails lay at her chest, which was covered by an old and worn pair of overalls. She wore nothing on her face but a set of freckles and a big, toothy grin. Her family was now moving to Oregon from Phoenix. As she looked out over the expanse of trees upon trees, her mind swirled, thinking that the world could contain this much green in it. Her father was a man of few words. All the hair on his head had left him from young age, except for a bushy mustache which sat upon his upper lip. He was big and burly, but uncharacteristically for his appearance, he went into accounting. Slowly, sitting in a stuffy accounting room, crunching numbers, with the closest thing to nature around him being a fish tank, it drained his soul completely. In a rare act of spontaneity and extreme risk-taking, he quit his job at the accounting firm in Phoenix and got a job as a fisherman on the Oregon coast. Her mother seemed like the opposite to him. She was where young Abby got her Irish appearance from. Long, beautiful red hair fell down from her head. Deeply green eyes adorned her face, and a smile of liquid gold seemed to protrude from her. She was the warmth of the house. As young Abby settled into her new surroundings, there was one thing itching inside of her. No longer was she surrounded by the dry, dull, and desolate desert. Around young Abby were the forests that never ended, and tree after tree after tree surrounded her. There was a whole coastline of all the great beasts of the sea, accompanied by the symphony of the ocean. There was something in that October wind which called her out of her home, and towards exploring all that there was to see in the town. Her mother, being the good parent that she was, had to tell her one important fact about the town. It was a story only told in a whisper. Why? No one could tell you for certain. There were certain principles far beyond my understanding and the townsfolk understanding, which governed the incantations which ruled over as a tyrant of this coastal village. Some of the children in the town simply regarded the tales as myths, legends, or rumors. Either way, no one dared test it. Her mother slowly got down on one knee and said in a whisper, "Abby, I will let you explore this town, which is more freedom than most parents give their children. But you must not go to the Manor on Polk Street." Smiling but surprised, Abby asked, "Why can't I go to the Manor on Polk Street?" Only shaking her head in great nervousness for her daughter, she replied, "I can't answer that question for you, for if I do, the effects of the spell will fall upon you instantly." The idea of some great calamity besetting her sent a chill down young Abby's spine. As much as we all might feel a degree of fear surrounding some strange and mysterious curse right in our own town when we were kids, we also all know that underneath that would be a deep curiosity to go and find out the exact nature of the curse. Every kid in the town felt this exact same calling, yet, being children of the town and growing up hearing the legends, they never plucked up the courage to go and explore for themselves. Unfortunately for Abby, that simply was not the case for her. Each day she would ride on her bike to Polk Street and simply stare at it like a new toy through the window sill. The house itself was old and dilapidated, It was built off a Victorian-era style, with its steep roofs, decorative trim, and bay windows. Yet, in the same right, the charm and sophistication of anything coming from the Victorian era was blotted out by the age and condition of the house. The windows were cracked or altogether smashed through. The floorboards outside on the porch seemed to be pulled up. Rusty nails lay exposed for someone to step on, and a strange green moss seemed to be growing on the side of the building. Each day she would visit the street in awe and curiosity. Many other kids did this as well, eyeing the old palace with childlike wonder and fear. Abby was no different from the rest of them, but each day she grew closer and closer. As time wore on, she grew bolder and bolder. Some of the other kids watched in horror as she approached that house of ghouls. Others edged her on, pressured her to move forward. It was almost as though her footsteps got louder as she approached the building. It was as though something inside those walls echoed out the sound she made simply to ask, "You dare come near me?" in a deep, trembling, and powerful voice. Each time it made the hair on her arms stand on edge and goosebumps to cover her all over. Yet never once did she ever tell her mother or her father of her escapades near the forbidden building. Finally, one day, in a fit of passion, when curiosity spun around her head like a whirlwind, and nothing in the world seemed more important than knowing what was inside that building, she walked up to the cold and eerie door handle, and with a slow squeaking of the metal, entered the house of horror. The children shuddered behind her as, without so much as touching the door slammed behind her. She knew she was locked in. The interior felt like that of a fantasy. It was surreal and unnatural, but nothing truly scary. It was as though time and gravity had a dimmed effect here. Everything moved slowly and gradually. It was unclear how long she simply sat at that doorway, staring in at the room before her. It could have been seconds. It could have been years. Both felt possible. As for the clock's attestation, it eternally remained 3:71 a.m. In the background and distantly, young Abby could hear an old scratched-up record of Sinatra's My Way playing in the background. The words sounded off and the pacing incorrect, but she could still recognize that song anywhere. On the inside of the manor, there was a once beautiful red couch with fine embroidery, but was now clearly stabbed over and over again with a large butcher's knife. The knife still sat there in the assaulted piece of furniture. Next to that sat a small analog clock, which said 3:71 a.m. Adjacent to that was a rather unnecessary grand clock with a bell in it that never seemed to chime. Inside, the minute and hour hand just went round and round in circles again and again, without ever ceasing. She jumped, startled, as a black cat ran across her path and went up a spiraling staircase. It was the first time she had seen that staircase. It was almost as though it had appeared here in the dead center of the room. Though the insides of this manor looked exactly the same when she first entered. She walked up to the staircase. It was made of an old and dying wood that felt brittle to the touch when you gave you splinters if you ran your hand along it. She began now to the start of her journey up the stairs, to find the cat, and not liking the bottom floor. She stepped onto the first board, but stopped herself. She noticed something under the sole of her shoe. Under closer inspection of what was on that board, she saw written in deep cuts in the wood, "Do not enter." Then, now appearing clear to her, she could see splatters of blood on every stair going up to the top. Her stomach was bound up in 1,000 knots. Even still, though she knew it would probably be the most foolish thing she could ever do, she went up to see what was up there. And though in retrospect she would have been completely free of the threat of magic if she had only stayed put and not ventured deeper into those wicked halls, she was still caught up in the curiosity. It was like the calling of that staircase was magic in and of itself, which beckoned her forward, in and deeper into the house of horror. She had taken her foot off the stair in order to read it, and now her foot hesitated above the wood, waiting for her to muster up the courage to place it down. In one great act of courage or recklessness, she shoved her foot down and began her ascent up. Looking up from the base, it was as though the staircase never ended. It went on, swirling upward and upward. The spiraling circles the staircase made was dizzying just to look at. Young Abby made her trek up the long and unforgiving staircase. Yet, as she went up, she felt the journey went short and easy. Quickly, she made it to the top of the stairs without even breaking a sweat. As she neared the top of the stairway, the music got louder. She was right on the cusp of finding what made that melodious sound. There was an old hallway before her, with peeling wallpaper and mold on the roof. The floor had holes in the woods in which you could see the room below. On the walls of the hallway were portraits of great and famous men. Yet, looking at them, you got the sense that they were old and malnourished. Washington looked like a skeleton with his skin wrapped around him tightly, and Napoleon's flesh was all but rotting away. They were man's mortality in full view. The hallway had no side doors and only led to one small door which was perfectly preserved. Slowly and tentatively she approached the door. Etched in the side of the door was the Latin writing "To mortale manet." It was an eerie sight, but Abby did not know Latin, and so could not say what it meant. Her hand shook as she reached out and touched the doorknob. It was as though something slow and debilitating coursed through her veins the second her finger hit the metal. Now she knew there was no turning back. Whatever is beyond this door, she thought. If it be ghost, goblin, or ghoul, I will face it. With one great pluck of internal strength, she turned the knob and threw open the door. What she saw inside surprised her. It was not a monster, or a beast, or a witch. Everything about what was said of what she was going to find seemed wrong. All she saw was a quaint old lady sitting in a rocking chair, rocking back and forth, listening to the music, looking out over the sea. Young Abby was taken aback. Even in this moment, the magic got to work. The old woman began to change. She was clearly old in appearance. Deep and heavy wrinkles sunk in her face. Her eyes were old and gray. Her bones and body looked frail and weak. And her hair was champy and gray. As Abby stood there, staring at her, her frailty began to disappear. The wrinkles on her face slowly lifted and faded. Her hair gained back its length and color. Her eyes returned to a youthful glow, and her body became that of a child. She leaped up from her rocker in a thrill of ecstasy. Abby believed now that she had won herself a friend. She reached out her hand to shake this girl's hand, but a bout of tiredness washed over her. Her whole body was weak as she stumbled her way into the rocker. She looked down at her own body, and it was old and decrepit. She was metamorphosized into an old woman. Now she did not have the strength to get up from that rocker. She was trapped in a prison of her own flesh. She tried desperately with every bit of her to simply move one of her arms, but she could not. Both lay lifeless at her side. All her body could do was rock back and forth in her chair. There she sits to this day, a prisoner of her own folly. Sitting in her chair every moment of her day, she hears the song again and again of Frank Sinatra's My Way, ringing in her ears and listening to its sound crash over the waves of the Pacific Ocean. She will be trapped like this until a young girl, more foolish or self-sacrificial than her, runs into the room to take her place. Until then, she is a prisoner, forever aged and old, conscious but unable to move.